and welcome back to another live stream here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Melanie Robson. I'm here to live stream yet again, as I do every week, and have been doing so for 6 months or so now, which we started to do because of the whole pandemic. We wanted to, had to be a bit more creative in the way we delivered content and services to people, so we decided let's start live streaming. And of course, the beauty of a live stream is that you're welcome to interact. Right now it's Wednesday, the 10th of November 2020. We are in Perth, Western Australia, if you don't know. And it's about 11:50, so I'm running 20 minutes behind time today. My usual live stream time, well, it has changed a bit, but it's supposed to be 11:30. But hey, I'm practicing the topic which I'm talking about today, which is perfectionism, and I'm practicing not being perfectionistic. And actually, I'm not a perfectionist, I would say, but I know a lot of people do struggle with that, hence I thought I would live stream about that today. So before I get into that, my role here, I'm a counselling psychologist by trade and qualification, so my live streams are about mental health issues, psychology, all these kinds of things, and I live stream once a week on these subjects. We do live stream twice a week though, and at the end of the week we live stream on different subjects, more to do with health and well-being, health promotion, those kinds of subjects, and all kinds of manner of things. So if you have any suggestions or ideas of topics you'd like us to live stream about as well or cover, by all means send us a message. Of course, if you're watching this on Facebook or watching this back, you would know how to reach us via Facebook. So I'm a bit delayed today, as I've mentioned, and that's because I'm in a different room here. If you watch any of my live streams, I'm usually sitting in a different room, just dropping my paper here, sitting in a different room, sitting at a desk, but today I'm in a different room, so I've kind of set things up a bit differently. I'm actually on a couch today, so I have a little bit more room to move. Wasn't quite brave enough to stand up. I had fiddling with all the camera and all that kind of stuff is just, takes a while, but I have learned so much. I also do the podcasts here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. That's another new thing we have just started. And we release a podcast every fortnight. And the purpose of that podcast, it's called The Hidden World of Women. And the podcast is to interview any woman really on any subject related to being female, being a woman, good, bad, ugly. There are good, bad and ugly bits of being female. Some of the women that I've had on already who've come to talk have talked about experiences with endometriosis. Somebody else talked about her experience with stillbirth and miscarriage. Somebody else has been on to talk about premature babies. We've had I've recently interviewed a woman to talk about her experience as a FIFO wife and mother, FIFO being fly in, fly out. Here in Western Australia, we have a really big fly in, fly out population of people because we are a very, very big state, and there's a lot of mining that goes on up north of Perth. So we have a lot of people that do fly in, fly out work. And so we talked about really how you manage that as a family and as a couple. So what else have we talked about? I interviewed someone to talk about sex and pleasure after birth, because the aim of the podcast is really to, now I'm just spruiking the podcast, but why not? The aim of the podcast is really to hear women's stories, and for women to talk about issues which a lot of us struggle with or have questions about, but don't really share or talk much about, or don't really ask questions about, or we feel really isolated in our experience. And we need to talk about that. We need to hear other women's stories. I think that's very empowering, very normalizing, very important. So hence we are doing the podcast, which is a totally new thing, and I've been learning how to use all the software in that as well. So it's been a really interesting year, certainly for me, but also as part of the service as well. We've really innovated and changed the way we do things. And speaking of innovation, we have another new thing which is coming up, about to be born, and that is called The Hidden World of You. So that is a separate site but linked to Women's Health and Wellbeing Services, and that is a membership site we are going to be having up and running, with content that you can access for a monthly or an annual fee, depending on what you want, what your circumstance is. And on that site, The Hidden World of You, members can access whole courses. So we've got courses so far. We're continuing to add content. So we have courses on anxiety, we've got one on self-compassion, one on postnatal depression and anxiety, and one on managing sort of your relationship with money. It's not a budgeting course, but it's more, your behaviours around money and how you relate to your money, more the psychology of money. We also, so they're whole courses. So some of them are 5 modules, some are 6 modules, some are 7 modules. So that's video content and like ebook content for all those modules. A lot of content, hours and hours of content there. But we also have really short. We have ebooks and we have little short videos on that are a lot quicker to get through. On so far, we've got topics on sort of self-care, vision boarding. There will be one about talking to your kids about sex. There'll be one on dating after divorce. What else have we got? Breaking difficult relationship patterns. These are some things that we're going to be uploading onto there, and we'll be creating new content every month. So if you wanted to go on that, join that membership site, and the profits of that membership site go into supporting women's health and wellbeing services. And we are a not-for-profit community agency, so we rely very heavily on funding and donations and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind too if you wanted to consider going on there. Anyway, I'm kind of it's like 6 minutes in and I haven't even got to my topic today. So let me just see, what is it saying? It's saying for me to share some stuff here. I'm going to share some content, share this live stream. Yes. Share. We're doing that. Save. So today what I'm going to be talking about is perfectionism. And when I was counselling clients, I'm not doing counselling anymore. I'm doing a few other different things here, if you haven't noticed. Still running some groups, but certainly in my role as a therapist, I've seen many women who really struggle, and men of course as well, but here we typically see many women who struggle with perfectionistic behaviours. So I thought it would be really useful to talk about that and talk about what it is, what perfectionism is, what typically happens when someone is really engaged in perfectionistic behaviours, and particularly behaviours that become problematic, and that get in the way of you living your best life, because we all have, tendencies, and we all have behaviours that we engage in that probably aren't the healthiest, and that's kind of okay, or we might have little down moments or little moments of anxiety. The thing is with any human behaviours and processes is how much is that becoming a problem? If it's just a little bit of peripheral issues, or I'm aware of this stuff but I can get on with my daily life, that's okay. When it becomes so problematic that it's interfering with your daily life, and your ability to live a really good life, and your world is kind of quite restricted, then that would warrant some further support and investigation in, whether that's counselling or medication or whatever that looks like for you, self-help groups, any of that kind of stuff. So that's how we kind of differentiate as psychologists, and certainly as doctors and counsellors, between behaviours that are just kind of normal, and we have times in our life where we struggle with certain things, versus behaviours which are getting in the way of us living a good life. And particularly if those behaviours or thought processes or moods have been going on for, weeks or months at a time, sometimes years, that would warrant definitely some further support. So, and that's no different with perfectionism. So, certainly with perfectionism, it's really easy, I think, to say, well, it's not a bad thing to be a perfectionist. I have really good standards and I hold myself up to these standards, and it helps me get where I want to go and achieve certain things. Yay, all good and well. But when those standards are so high that you become like almost paralyzed in your ability to do things because you're so fearful of failing or fearful of not getting it 100% perfect, or you become really obsessed about certain things, that's when perfectionism is not useful. So I'm going to be going through some information sheets. As I've mentioned before on some of the other topics I have live streamed about, I pull a lot of information from a brilliant website from the Centre for Clinical Interventions. That centre is here in Perth, Western Australia. It's funded by our health department, but you can hop on their website. I think it's cci.wa.gov.au, and they have tons of content and information on a whole variety of mental health issues: depression, anxiety, social anxiety, body dysmorphia, perfectionism, worry, eating disorders, this whole thing. Their content is very CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy based. So that is a type of therapy that's very well researched, works for some people, doesn't work for other people. Use what you like, take the rest. But it's very CBT based, and every mental health topic on there they extensively cover. There's usually 6, 7, 8 modules on there. You can work through those on your own. You can access that content, you can print out the modules, you can work away at them, or you can certainly take them into counselling and cover some of that stuff too. CBT is really good for looking at what we would call unhelpful thoughts that are contributing to someone's mental health difficulties, and also looking at problematic, associated problematic behaviours, and how we looking at the linking between feeling, thinking, doing kind of thing, and the outcome and the problems that are arising, because often we find ourselves actually quite stuck in our thinking, and it's our thinking that is becoming the problem more than the problem itself. So that's a really good website to hit up if you're interested in doing any kind of work on yourself and on any kind of mental health sort of subject there. So that's what I've got today. I've got some of the worksheets from there, and I'm just going to be talking through some of this stuff. But this is only just sort of one-page grabs. Like I said, if you were to hop on there, there is a lot more information there, and you can work away on that stuff in your own time, in your own space, which is really good. So let's start with the definition of perfectionism. Perfectionism is not necessarily about being perfect. It's not possible to be perfect or do things 100% all of that time. And although there's sort of no perfect definition, we do understand perfectionism to involve 3 main things. So the first one is the relentless striving for extremely high standards, either of yourself or other people or both. Those unrelenting high standards that are personally very demanding. And to an outsider that might look like, wow, you really put yourself under a lot of pressure and expectation there. So to an outsider that might seem extreme, but to you, you're like, well, it's just the way I hold myself. I've got to kind of reach these standards that I set for myself, or that I set for other people. 2, another component of the definition, judging your self-worth based largely on your ability to strive for and achieve these unrelenting standards. So how you feel about yourself is very much related and connected to these standards. And immediately, I can see the difficulty, the problem in that, because if your standards are up here and your self-esteem, really your self-worth is based on always reaching them, and you're never going to reach them all the time. It's physically impossible for a person to do. But if that is tied to that, if all of your self-worth is tied up in that, that's really difficult. You are going to be working extremely hard, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to basically feel like any sort of semblance of self, or that you're a semi-decent person. And if you can't reach those, boy, does that lead to a pretty substantial kind of crash, or really bad, depression, really, and lots of anxiety and lots of struggle, because if your self-worth only is tied up to achieving and perfectionism and these really high standards, you're setting yourself up, unfortunately, for really difficult time and a lot of unnecessary struggle in your life. The third component of the definition of perfectionism is experiencing negative consequences of setting such demanding standards, yet continuing to go for them despite the huge cost to you. So there's kind of a stuckness, we would say, in that. So you might be aware that setting these standards for yourself is actually really difficult and problematic and is causing a lot of stress or a lot of problems in your life, yet you keep doing them. Yet there's this drive, within you, because if that is connected to your self-worth, and that alone, you will continue to work towards them because you're desperately trying to feel good about yourself. And we can kind of see the problem in that, straight away, because, like I said, it's impossible for a person to always meet those standards. Plus, there are so many other things in a person's life and within themselves that are related to self-worth. But if we attach it all to achievement, it's very one-sided and very heavy. And how that can be set up sometimes, but not every time, is when we grow up. We grow up in families, our parents are doing the best they can with the knowledge and information they have at the time. And for for some parents, they may find themselves praising their child or their children when they do, the right thing, or when they've achieved something, when you've won that race, when you've got an A, when you've made it into a team, when you did. So when a lot of your external praise, say from your parents or from your main caregivers growing up, when that was popped on you because you did good stuff, you learn, I'm going to feel loved, I'm going to feel more accepted when I achieve. So, and the difficulty is that you're not kind of loved and accepted just for being you. Whether you've achieved something, you might have completely failed at something, or just be a very average student, or just a really average person, kind of thing. And rather than just being loved for being you, you're only kind of loved and given praise for achieving certain things. And again, I hope you can see that is problematic, because that's kind of going to leave you feeling a bit empty and a bit like, I always have to do my best every time. I have to blitz this recital, or I've got to do all these activities and get A's and everything, and be the first and be the captain and be the leader and be the ducks and all this kinds of stuff, because it's the only way I can feel good about myself, because that's kind of what I was taught growing up. So that's one way a person might develop these kind of unrelenting high standards and strong traits of perfectionism there. There is a real paradox, though, of perfectionism. And like I said, often people can think it's a really positive thing, and, there's just that pursuit of excellence, isn't that a really good thing? And I do think in our society, there's a lot of pressure to achieve, a lot of pressure, actually. We're a capitalist society, we're having lots of stuff, and having money and having prestige and status, that's really kind of praised and really valued, I think. But gosh, there's so much more to life than your job, or how much money you earn, or how successful you are, because we're not going to be successful all the time. So it can be seen as a really good thing, having high standards and working hard. You've got to work hard to get anywhere. But I really like, speaking of hard work, I'm just going to nip over here and get a little graphic that is sitting on a desk over here, which is just fantastic. It actually did pop up on Facebook, so just give me for a second. This one here about hard work. So what I thought would make me productive, right? And this is, I don't know if you can see, hard work, like 100% hard work. But what really makes me productive is probably a third of your life, of your world is hard work. And you've got a bit here of time off, really, really important to support the rest and digest system, as opposed to the fight and flight system. Exercise, healthy eating, and sleep. There's three damn things that sort of underlie everything. Eat well, move your body, get enough rest and sleep. But hard work isn't 100% all your life, all your time, putting in energy without balancing up other things. Where is the rest of your life in this? So hence, I think this is a really good example of perfectionism in action, and how it can really suffocate you and suffocate other components of your life. But if you're, feeling a little empty or not really good inside, you strive for this all the time just to feel like you're an okay person. So that's a really good graphic. Anyway, I've gone off the track there. So people often have good reasons for being perfectionists. They may say it allows them to be really organised, to be really efficient, to be prepared for anything, And although, that having those kind of standards certainly may help us achieve things in life, it can actually impair performance. Okay, so being too perfectionistic can actually stuff up your performance. I was going to swear there, but I thought maybe I shouldn't swear. And that is the paradox of it, because if somebody is really perfectionistic and really struggles with those behaviours, because they want to do so well in things, the flip side is that it actually, undercuts them and leaves them doing less better than someone who's just kind of pretty average and just ticking along. how is that so if you're striving? And I'm going to talk about that. So the excessive drive to achieve ever higher levels of performance is self-defeating, okay? As it leaves you little chance of meeting your goals. It's just not going to be possible, and feeling good about yourself. So you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, and that can leave you very stressed all the time, really tense. Your whole body is kind of wired, and your brain is like overly active, and you're really, I think, triggering that fight or flight system. So you'd have a lot of cortisol, a lot of stress hormones, perhaps a lot of adrenaline going through your system all the time, leaving you just kind of wound up and on edge. Good luck trying to sleep. You might really be struggling with headaches or tummy problems. I'd certainly be expecting some sort of body issues going on with someone who's really, really perfectionistic and constantly striving in that way. It can also make your self-worth particularly vulnerable as not reaching the probably unachievable standards that you set for yourself may result in you feeling like a failure. So the very thing you're not wanting to do, the very feeling you're not wanting to feel, you're accidentally triggering that feeling by your perfectionistic behaviors. And you can see again how the paradox, it actually doesn't really make sense. The more you strive, the harder you work, the higher your standards, the greater the risk, I think, really, in vulnerability, in these self-defeating behaviors, and in lowering your self-worth and actually failing at something, or having that sense of paralysis because you can't move. There's so much you want to do and you don't want to stuff it up, but you've got to do it. And so you put things off, you procrastinate. Procrastination is certainly one of the behaviors that comes along with perfectionism. Kind of ironic, but makes sense if you're like putting something off because it has to be perfect, and you're so terrified of it not being perfect that you just keep putting it off, and then you fail. So it actually is not working for you. We need to think about really the workability of something, of a behavior or of a thought sort of pattern. Is that workable in your life? Is it actually helping you? Is it building something into your life? Is it giving you something? You're feeling better about something, or is it actually digging you further into a hole? So perfectionism can show up in a few different life domains, any and all. You might be real perfectionist at work, but at home it's just a free-for-all. There's just crap everywhere kind of thing. Or you might be really perfectionistic with your home, with the standards of living, with cleanliness, with organisation, with order, with cleaning, those kinds of things. You might be perfectionistic with your study, with your close relationships. You might have these really high standards of the way you expect people to be with you or expect them to behave, remembering that we cannot control other people. All we can do is look after ourselves. That's it. That's all you can do. Okay, you've got no hope of trying to change anyone else. Really important to let that one go. Perfectionistic behaviors can also show up in the area of eating, body weight, dieting, all those kinds of things. I think that's a big one. Grooming or personal hygiene. You've probably seen those people who, gosh, no matter what's happened to them in their life, they look meticulous and perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I'm always slightly envious of that. I'm like, God, I wish I could look that good every day. I just can't be bothered sometimes, But sometimes there might be some perfectionism kind of going on there that's contributing to that. There might not be. I'm not saying, taking care of yourself is being overly perfectionistic, but again, is it problematic or not? That's all I would just say about that. Other areas of life that perfectionism may show up are sport, leisure, health and fitness, which to me would sort of tie in with perhaps some of the eating behaviours there and body image. So yeah, you can be perfectionistic in one of those areas, in 2-3 of those areas, and maybe all of those areas, which would be absolutely exhausting. I would be expecting you to check yourself into a hospital at some point if you're trying to maintain standards in all these areas. It's not possible. Often too, I'm just thinking now when I used to see clients, if a woman was very perfectionistic and had very high standards of herself, and had very high standards of herself in her career and in her work, and was quite high achieving, or had worked her way up in a workplace to quite a high level of management or something like that, and then had a baby, often that would just butt heads. It's very, very difficult. If you've ever had a baby, you would know that you have almost completely no control. Oh, I'm in both groups. Thanks, Emma. You have no control really over the way babies behave, and it can bring up, it can be an enormous stress and struggle, can contribute to postnatal depression and anxiety if you're sort of bringing in some of those perfectionistic behaviours and that kind of need to control things into having a baby and growing a baby, feeding the baby, keeping the baby alive, because babies have their own damn schedule and they're just going to do what they want, and we need to actually follow their need. We have to let go of the way we want to do things a lot of the time, and that doesn't bode well. A lot of these mothers would end up really, really struggling with becoming a mother because their perfectionistic behaviours were not fitting now with this big change in their life and the introduction of a baby. So let's have a look at some examples. How am I a perfectionist? So some common types of perfectionistic behaviours include struggling to make decisions in a timely manner. For example, not being able to decide what to wear to work each morning because, if you think about that, you're really perfectionistic, you've got these high standards, you need to look, need, and it's not a want, it's when things become a need, that's a lot of pressure. I need to look a certain way, and it's so overwhelming making those decisions that you can't actually either make a decision, or it takes you forever to make a decision. So whilst you might eventually walk out the door, it might be 10 o'clock, kind of thing, because it's taken you so much time to choose what to wear, to do your hair, to do your makeup, to make sure everything's perfect, okay? Reassurance seeking, it's another way perfectionistic behaviours might show up. So you might need to, ask others and check with other people. How am I doing? Is my work okay? Is this okay? Am I doing it okay? Excessive organising and list making. I think I can be a bit prone to that sometimes. For example, repeatedly writing and rewriting lists of the tasks you want to get done. You might tick off a few things on one list and create another list, and there's more stuff underneath. But I think that's kind of modern life. And if you're, a mum, or you're juggling a lot of things, don't have to be a mother, of course, but if you're juggling just lots of competing things in your life, having a list isn't a bad thing. But the point is this kind of excessive organising and excessive list taking. Another common behaviour might be giving up too easily on something. So, you might start a new hobby or a new activity, even a new job. And if you're not perfect at it within the first 2 weeks or 2 lessons or 2 classes or whatever, or 2 months, I'm just using 2 as the magic number, then you give up, and we know that, in order to be really good at something, it takes sometimes years of practice, years and years, it really does, unless you're one of those freaky annoying people who are just a genius at something the first time. Please don't watch this, because, no, I'm just kidding. But the point is, giving up easily, that is, can potentially be a sign of perfectionistic behaviours, because if you can't do it perfectly straight away, you just want to give up. Procrastinating, I mentioned this before, if you put things off, puts off starting something, a work project, an assignment, if you're studying, anything like that, because you're so afraid that it's not good enough, that's going to lead you to potentially failing, handing it in late and losing marks or whatever, and then that's not very perfect then, is it? And there's that sort of weird paradox showing up. Not knowing when to stop, so this might be, involving arguing over and over and over, to argue a point because you have this kind of urge for it to, no, it has to be right, and you have to get this. Even when someone is sort of disengaged or walked off or doesn't care anymore, you're kind of driven. It's that kind of driven behaviour, this kind of drive within you, to be perfect and to have things right and to make sure people know that, and I'm saying it with this kind of pressure in my voice, because that's that kind of pressure, internal pressure within a person striving for these perfectionistic behaviours to feel good, really, because without it, they probably don't feel very good about themselves. Another behaviour here, a lot of checking behaviours, repeatedly looking in the mirror, how's my face, how's my makeup, have I got any zits, what's my hair doing, and again, that, some of that excessive reassurance seeking might play in there as well. Hoarding, could show up, keeping bank statements for 20 years just in case you might need them, and hoarding behaviours show up in many different, you can hoard anything. I think we've seen those TV shows with people who hoard a lot. And look, hoarders are really, really struggling people. I think it's easy to see them on TV and kind of be horrified and like think that's terrible and shocked and to judge those people. But, there's probably a truckload of anxiety, under that hoarding behaviour, and there's some sort of trade-off or payoff for that person. So, hoarding shows up, believe it or not, in some of these perfectionistic behaviours as well. Slowness, for example, speaking slowly to ensure that you've said the right thing, or that the other person has heard you properly. I think that slowness can show up too with the work that you do, or study that you do, or whatever activities that you do. Because you want it to be perfect, you do it really slowly and meticulously to make sure it's perfect every step of the way, and then it takes you twice as long or worse kind of thing, and then it's late, and then it doesn't go well. And avoiding situations where you might fail. So not applying for jobs because you're afraid that you won't get them, or not doing study, or not even attempting that assignment because you're like, well, I'm probably going to fail it anyway. And again, how ironic is that? Because if you're a perfectionist, you want to be doing perfect and brilliant at everything, but that is actually stopping you from even attempting certain things. You just avoid, give up, straight away, procrastinate, all these things I've been talking about. So let's look now at what maintains perfectionism. Remembering that perfectionism involves the relentless striving for extremely high standards, judging your self-worth based largely on your ability to achieve these standards, and continuing to set demanding standards for yourself despite the cost associated with striving for them. So when a person's self-worth depends on their achievements, they push themselves to attain unrealistically high standards, as I've just mentioned. And they may act in ways intended to ensure that they meet these standards, the checking, the correcting, all these kinds of things. But, at the end of the day, judge themselves extremely harshly. Very self-critical. I think most perfectionists have this really loud inner critic in their head yelling at them all the time to do it better. You're not working hard enough, that's not right, what are you doing, you're really stupid at this, you need to keep going, and I think the thing that shows up too, and they do mention this here, that certainly when the problem, how perfectionism gets maintained, that there's kind of this whole process that goes on, starting with your self-worth being dependent on achieving and meeting these kinds of standards, and that is based on a whole set of rules and assumptions that would be operating within you somewhere, and if you were to come to counselling, you would probably be exploring some of those. What are some of your beliefs, and what do you assume to be true in the world that is contributing to your unhelpful behaviours that are perfectionistic? And then you have these unrelenting high standards and these behaviours that come along with it, these perfectionistic behaviours that I just went through that list there. You would, along with all that, you would be having some of your perfectionistic thinking, which would be some unhelpful thinking styles. Some of those might be catastrophizing, always thinking the worst. If I don't do this perfectly, something terrible is going to happen, or that means that I'm a complete failure. I am a failure, as opposed to I failed at that, or I didn't achieve that as well as I want to. When you're really perfectionistic and your self-worth is tied to that, everything is an I am, everything is kind of swallowed up in that belief that you have that if I don't achieve this, or if I don't do this perfectly, it means that I'm crap and I'm a failure and I'm no good and no one would like me and I'm not good at anything. It's very dramatic statements here, catastrophizing, the worst thing ever. Also what might show up is black and white thinking, or all or nothing thinking, which is, there's kind of no grey, there's no middle ground, there's no kind of flexibility in thinking. It has to be that way or else kind of thing. There's no room for error, there's no room for, okay, well maybe I need to adjust that, or maybe I need to shift that standard a bit, and actually maybe I should add in a bit of this or get rid of a bit of that. No, it has to be that way or the highway kind of thing. What we would call shoulding and musting. So this is really big. You know, we all do these. There's some of these unhelpful thinking styles. I still really struggle with a lot of them. Shoulding and musting is really common. So that's when you have a lot of shoulds in your vocabulary. I should do this, he should do that, I should be better at this, I should be able to do this by now, I should be perfect at this, you know, should, or must. I must do this well, I must get an A, I must complete this on time, my children must behave, you know, my partner should always be able to read my mind, you know, all these kinds of things. Mind reading is another unhelpful thinking style. Cognitive distortions, as you know, the language kind of goes. They're just distortions in the way we think about the world. We all have them, like I said. You know, jumping to conclusions might be another one. So assuming things of other people, you know, predicting the future. You know, if I don't do this and this bad thing is going to happen, so you've kind of got catastrophizing, you've got predicting there, and then you might go, well, I should do it. And no. So this is all this kind of what we would call perfectionistic thinking at play here, that's really driving and maintaining some of those perfectionistic behaviours. So there's kind of this whole process that's actually going on in your head, really, that's contributing to your behaviours. And so you kind of go through all them, and then you either meet your standards or you fail to meet them. So when you fail to meet them, as you probably know, if you do struggle with perfectionism or, you know, inner kind of criticism, your inner critic would be just going to town. You know, it would be telling you all sorts of horrible things about yourself, that you are pathetic and that you're a complete failure and you're no good and you shouldn't be doing this and why did you even try and da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm a terrible person, all these kinds of things. On the flip side, you might actually meet that standard. You know, you've gone through this whole process and you've actually done it. You know, you've actually got an A, or you've blitzed that kind of work project, or you've achieved something. However, for a perfectionist, instead of being able to sit back, congratulate yourself, you know, feel pretty good, like, oh, you know, that's pretty all right, I'm all right. What happens is the goalposts start to shift, you know, so this can happen, like I was thinking too, in like dieting and stuff as well. You know, you might get to that goal, but then you're like, it's not good enough. I'm still not where I want to be. I still don't look the way I want to look. You know, I thought all these magical things would kind of happen. We don't consciously think that, but that's kind of what's going on a deeper level. And certainly with perfectionism, you might meet that standard, but you decide that the original standards aren't good enough. That's why we call it, you know, shifting goalposts, because you've actually kicked that goal. You know, woohoo! You know, we all should be cheering. You should be feeling good, but you're like, actually, no, that wasn't good enough. And you actually fail to see the enormity of what you have achieved. You know, that you've actually done something pretty major and pretty significant. And for the outsider, they might be like, wow, that's awesome, you know. But for you, with your fragile self-worth, not feeling very good about yourself, actually at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter if you reach all your standards, because you're going to keep shifting that goalpost further and further out, so that it makes it even more difficult for you to achieve. And you never end up feeling good about yourself, because your self-worth is so bound up on these unrealistic standards and expectations and these goalposts that just keep moving. And so you're so focused on the outside, you know, on achieving these things and getting to certain places, rather than working on building an inner sense of self and self-worth, and building up something stronger inside of you, so that it doesn't matter what you achieve or what you do on the outside world. Inside, you know that you're an okay person. You're a good enough person. All we ever need to be is good enough. But for someone who's a perfectionist, that's not good enough, kind of thing. And you can see how problematic that is, and what a frenzy of a life, and what a stressful life that is, and how delicate things are, because the slightest little failure, the slightest little thing that doesn't go your way, and things that are never going to go your way all the time, they just don't, you know, it's just going to tip you over into feeling even worse about yourself, and then striving even harder, or just kind of collapsing in the corner and going, you know what, I give up. Like, I truly give up, you know, really kind of frightening and serious stuff. So in terms of maintaining perfectionism, like I said, there's a kind of a few sort of underlying things that are going on. There's underlying rules and assumptions that are not very flexible or not very accurate. So these kind of beliefs that unless I do things perfectly, it's not good enough. Things like if I make a mistake, the whole thing's going to fail, or the whole world's going to stop, or the business is going to stop, or the family's going to fall apart. Like, woof, pressure much, that's a lot. Unrelenting high standards kind of going on there, like we said. They never, if you're a perfectionist, you never really conclude that you've worked hard enough. Never. You could always work more kind of thing. You could always achieve more and do more. And if you fail, you either move those goalposts or you just give up altogether. And you never really are able to hold on to a sense of achievement. Like it's very fleeting. And that's why, ideally, when we raise children, we don't want them to build their sense of worth on achieving things, on doing things, We want them to feel good about themselves just because they're them. Because these little people are going to grow up to be adults, and we want adults, ideally, who feel good about themselves. We need adults who are going to put all of us psychologists completely out of a job. And I mean that seriously. In an ideal world, we would all, we might struggle now and then, but on the whole, we're able to hold ourselves and feel like, I'm doing the best I can, and that's okay. I can bounce back. I can be resilient when things happen. I don't have to set myself high standards. I can work at something, I can do my best, but hey, if it doesn't work out, I'm still okay. It's still okay. The world is still okay. Whereas if you're a perfectionist, the world's not okay. I'm not okay. It's not okay. Completely different sort of inner worlds operating there, if that makes sense. Another part of that maintaining perfectionism, those behaviours, engaging in a whole range of behaviours. I went through that list, and that perfectionistic thinking, those unhelpful thinking styles. So that's kind of a whole list there on this beautiful page. What else should I be reading that's not too repetitive? Perfectionistic behaviours. I'm going to go through some of this. So what they're saying here is that a hallmark of perfectionism is the tendency to judge your self-worth, as I've mentioned, largely on your ability to achieve these really, really high standards. And there are what we call perfectionism active behaviours and perfectionism avoidance behaviours. Could split them into two categories there. So with that list I went through before, procrastination, excessive checking, what have they got here? List making, correcting other people. Excessive organising, not procrastination, that's in the avoidance one. So these are some of the perfectionistic active behaviours, so things a perfectionist would actually do. So the checking, the hoarding, the list making, the correcting other people, versus some of those avoiding strategies which are in play, avoiding behaviours, because you want to avoid failure, you want to avoid feeling bad, so you actually end up avoiding engaging in that activity altogether, giving up too soon, being really indecisive, procrastinating, avoiding tasks altogether. The problem though with these perfectionistic behaviours is that it really keeps you from learning whether or not your perfectionistic beliefs are true. You never really get to challenge them. And this is what ideally we would want someone to do. Someone who's, say, wanting to work on these behaviours, we would start, we would be having a look at the lay of the land to start with. Okay, what's kind of going on? What are you kind of thinking here? What are some of your beliefs? What are some of your behaviours? What's kind of happening? We'd get a bit of a picture of the pattern. And then we would want to support a person to look at alternatives, to challenge the thinking, to fail on purpose, to look at what comes up in their head in terms of the inner critic, in order to challenge some of those innate beliefs and assumptions which are driving those perfectionistic behaviours. For example, a person who has difficulty delegating tasks to colleagues may hold the belief that it's necessary to maintain their standards in the workplace. So I have to do everything. What that is saying. This shows up, I think, a lot in families, frankly, with women who we might complain a lot. I've certainly done it myself, so I'm no judgment here, complain that I'm always doing everything in the house. Why does it always come down to me? Why do I have to carry this kind of mental load and do all this stuff? Sometimes though, when you dig underneath that, what's actually happening is we're not letting anyone help us, because if we let them vacuum, they're not going to do it to my standard. And my standards are up here. If I let them cook, we're just going to eat, I don't know, sausages and mash every night, and so you don't want to eat that. Or if I let them, I don't know, do the washing or something, they're not going to do the washing right. They're not going to put in the right powder. They're not going to put in the right amount. They're not going to hang it out the way. You've got to let that stuff go, because that is adding to your load, particularly if you're running a household. But too, if that is showing up in your work and you're not delegating when you need to be, everything's going to be falling on you, for starters. You're going to be feeling pretty damn cranky under a lot of pressure, because you've got such high standards and because you're a perfectionist, and you're unable to delegate and share stuff with other people because you don't believe other people are going to meet your standards. They're probably not, because we're all different. We've all got different ways of doing things. But by continuing not to delegate work, the perfectionist is unable to test whether their beliefs are true or accurate. So you keep yourself kind of trapped. You keep yourself engaged in these problematic behaviours, which can swallow up all of your time, all of your energy. So reducing perfectionistic behaviours, let's have a quick look at that. There are a few different ways, and you would be going to a lot more depth if you were coming in for some counselling. And of course we do counselling and therapy here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. That's kind of our main thing. You'll be doing a lot more exploration of this kind of stuff. But here is just a little list here, a little ladder, they call it, a little ladder towards change. So what you'd be doing is start with choosing a specific goal or specific behaviour that you want to change. So just start with one thing that's challenging. Break down that goal into little small steps by changing who is there, what you do, when you do it, where you do it, and how long you do it for. Ooh, that's quite a lot of work. Complete each little step one at a time, beginning with the least difficult, working your way up. Do a step frequently and repeatedly to make sure you're comfortable with it before you move on. Okay, I'm not even going to go more into that because I think that's quite way more complex than I originally thought, kind of thing. So I'm just going to leave that aside. But like I said, if you wanted to explore this in particular in more depth, hop on that CCI website and have a look at some of the actual workbooks on perfectionism. But what else you could do is sort of what they would call behavioural experiments to challenge, is the world really going to fall apart if I don't get this done? If the washing isn't done perfectly, does that really matter? Does that mean the whole house is going to fall apart? Probably not. So you want to be actually challenging those behaviours. Just wondering what happened then if I went offline. Oh well. Perfectionistic thinking, there's a lot more stuff here, a lot more in depth than some of the stuff I talked about before, the black and white thinking, the catastrophizing, the jumping to conclusions, those kinds of things. There's actually a lot more, the shoulding and the musting, really, really big thing. The thing with thinking is becoming aware. So in any behaviour that you want to change in your life, any behaviour, you first need to become aware of what's going on in your head regarding that behaviour. We don't get anywhere in life unless we develop a sense of self-awareness, and that can be hard. I think that can be quite confronting. That also means taking responsibility for yourself and what you think and what you do. What we think, our brains are never-ending thinking machines. We can't turn them off. The brain is going 24/7. You probably know what that's like. It's relentless. And we can't stop that without dying, without, I don't know, lobotomizing ourselves or something like that. I'm being facetious. But what I'm saying is that largely we don't have a lot of control over what we think. What we do have control of is the way we look at our thinking, the way we interact with our thinking, the way we think about our thinking. Okay? So developing some sort of skills or awareness or practice, and just being able to monitor your thoughts, to be able to see them for what they are. So that would be, Yes, using some sort of mindfulness techniques to just kind of separate yourself out a little bit there, so that you're not so connected or so fused, as we would say, with our thoughts and just believing everything. And because we're not our thoughts, we're much more than our thoughts, we're much more than our feelings. The same goes though with feelings. We cannot control our feelings. You know, feelings are messengers. They're there for a reason. It's the feelings underneath everything that drive a lot of these problematic behaviors, I believe. You know, either we're wanting to avoid certain feelings or we want to feel certain feelings. We want to try and control that stuff, and you can't. But the more you're able to sit with your behaviors, sit with your feelings, sit with your thoughts without necessarily trying to change them, so learning to sort of be with them, learning to see our thoughts for what they are. It's just a thought, it's just a bunch of kind of words going through my head. You know, the more we're able to tolerate some pretty uncomfortable feelings, and like I said, if you're a perfectionist, you're probably struggling with some pretty low self-worth. You're probably feeling pretty damn anxious under everything. Doesn't look like that, but you know, that's probably what's happening underneath. And in order to try to manage all that stuff, we start engaging in these difficult problematic behaviors which start to ruin and run our life. So when we're able to, you know, start working on ourselves and become much more aware of our thoughts, become much more willing to sit with our feelings, to kind of nurture and parent ourselves, then we have more choice over what we do. So what we do have control over is our behaviors, it's our actions. Very much, you know, actions speak louder than words. Absolutely. You know, you can talk, I could talk till the cows come home, but unless I'm willing to do something, physically do something that's different, it doesn't kind of matter, you know. And you can come to counselling for weeks and months and years on end, but if you're not actually willing to do something different, there's only so far you can go. It is, like I said, really, really important to have self-awareness, you know, and to be able to see your thoughts, but then you've got to do something with that kind of insight. Otherwise, believe me, it becomes very, very frustrating when you see yourself stuck in these ways and these patterns. The body is starting to have built new pathways. That's all I'm trying to say. I'm kind of rabbiting on a bit here. Look, I'm going to finish up talking today because I'm a little worried that the recording keeps jumping on and off, or connecting and disconnecting. So that, look, I just touched on a little bit of perfectionism. Like I said, if you want more information, hop on that website, you know, Google stuff by all means, but just be careful what content you consume. Make sure it's valid stuff, but also I think it's really worthwhile reading about other people's experiences or struggles with perfectionism and how they've challenge that or change that in their lives. Of course, if you want to really work on that, by all means come in to get some counselling, some therapy to with someone that you feel comfortable with, to explore those problematic behaviours. So thank you very much for bearing with me today as I've live streamed in a different space, a bit ad hoc. It's kind of nice sitting on a couch though. It's a bit different to being at a desk, have a little bit more movement. I hope it's been useful. If you have any suggestions of any mental health or psychology related topics you would like me to talk about, by all means let us know. You know, let us know via our Facebook page, or you can hop on our website, or probably email us info@whws.org.au. You know, give us a call. Any of those means of communication, there's lots, but we're always open to exploring new things. Next week I'll be back on Tuesday morning talking about another mental health topic. I always think, right, I'm going to be prepared and I'm going to be able to tell people what I'm going to be talking about next week, and every week I don't do that because I'm not perfect. Sorry about that. So I'll be back next week. There will be another live stream though at the end of this week on something to do with more physical health and well-being, probably, you know, unless you have any other suggestions, in which case we will listen to that and go with that. So take care, have a good week, and I will see you back next week. Bye.